I'm guessing you're here today to see how I printed and painted Alice from Wonderland. Hi, this is Bristolink Miniatures. My name is Mike, and today I'll be going down the rabbit hole to show you how I ended up printing and painting Alice from Wonderland, a 6-scale miniature from CA 3D Studios, which I'll have a link down in the description. All right, let's get into it.
All right, let's jump right on in. I'm going ahead and using a bold titanium white from Pro Acryl. Any white would work. And I'm going over the model that was already black primed. And I'm doing this in a very non-zenithal way, meaning I'm pretty much applying white from all directions. The only thing I'm not doing is I'm not blasting it into the deepest recesses or the folds or creases or seams. And the reason that I still like using black as a primer, even though majority of the model might end up being bright colors or exposed to the light, is that black will still give me the little bit of shadow in the deepest areas of the model, which I find to be really helpful later on when it comes to doing your shadowing and highlighting and that. It just is kind of a built-in shadow, if you will, in the deepest areas. So you can see here in the hair especially how that really just lends a big help into the shadow areas, even though that I'm not spraying only from top down, which is your traditional zenithal is top down only. I'm really hitting all my parts from all angles. But again, like I said, just staying away, not blasting it into the deepest folds, recesses, seams. Onto her skin, starting with a Sunset Red by Vallejo, and I will be covering the entire amount of skin with this color. This just really gives a nice underlying boost of pigment, if you will, for her skin, that the other colors, when they're put on, this will kind of like give a very subtle boost to those colors from underneath. I'm putting this on like probably a normal thinness, normal coverage. Just being careful not to go too much. You don't want it too heavy. Just a nice smooth, even coverage. I only did one coat. One coat's plenty, especially if you're going over the white here like I am. And now I'm switching to this basic skin tone, and this will be the base actual skin color of her. And again, I'm hitting it from all angles. I'm maybe staying a little less of this on the areas underneath, like the more of the shadowy areas of her skin, in the folds of her skin, in that. But again, this is pretty much full coverage. Super, well, not super thin, but one thin coat here is plenty for at this stage. And again, here I'm just being very careful not to blast that in the deepest creases there, like between her legs. Those two legs I just temporarily put together to get the right shadowing effect between the legs. They will come apart later when we do the details of her stockings and boots. And again, the same thing with the face. Pretty even coverage here. I'm staying away from the deepest folds there around her eyes and her eyelashes and that. Moving on to a transparent, it's a red ink, watered down. It's probably mostly water with this little red ink here. Don't go full red ink. It'll just make your whole model red. It's very, very watered down here. And I'm just little super light coats, just blasting it into the underside areas to give it more of you can see the difference in the shade of the skin. It just really goes down into those recesses to kind of give it that deeper color, if you will. And here I'm just also hitting her knees and her elbows, the areas of the skin where it would be kind of more of a worn effect, if you will. And now moving on to kind of like the skin highlight here, the light skin tone. And this would be pretty much from your top down or from your direction of your light down to the skin. And again, really thin coats here. You don't want to go super thick because you're just going to completely cover up all the work you've already done. You want it, each layer you want to be able to have it kind of bleed or see through the previous layer just a little bit. So keep your paints thin, and you can do multiple coats. If it wasn't enough the first time, you can certainly go back with another thin coat. But if you put it on too thick, you're not going to easily be able to remove it, of course. And here I'm just being careful not to hit the tip of her knees there, the edge of her knees. I want to keep those red. And then again, top down here. She has bangs, which a lot of that forehead would be covered up and actually in shadow. But those bangs are going to cover up so much of it. I'm not real concerned that I've got too much highlight there. I've got some Orchis dermis that I've watered down, probably 50-50, maybe even more. Might be even more water than that. And again, kind of where I did where the red ink earlier, same idea here, is just to hit those areas where the skin is folding, where you have more of like the roughed up parts of your skin, like, you know, elbows and knees and knuckles, inside of the finger folds and that. And just, you know, light coverage here. That's the kind of the secret. The back of her knees here where they're folding, and I'll, you know, hit the tip of her, the top of her knees as well to give it that red effect, or that reddish skin worn effect. I don't really know the term for that, but you know, when the skin's kind of roughed up there. And here I'm still using Orchis dermis to hit the underside of her face, the recesses there around her eyes, or eyelashes, the underside of her nose, under the chin, and the folds there around her jawline, and on the backside of her neck, even though a lot of that, I think all of that will be hidden with her hair, but just doing that anyhow. And then again, just like I did with the other arm, getting that fold where her arm is bending, and the elbow as well, and then probably hit a little bit there in the fingers. And here I'm going back now to the light skin tone. It's like a teeter-totter. It's a little bit back and forth. I'm pushing some of that Orchis dermis back that I've got maybe too aggressive with. And again, now I'm coming down from that top of her face to really give that final highlight of the skin. Normally I don't do the face till towards the end of the video, but I thought I'd mix it up this time and jump right on in and hit the face first. So I'm starting with a gray. It looks black, but it's actually a dark gray, and I'll have it in a later part of the video. And I'm putting this gray on her eyelashes. Her eyelashes are really well sculpted here, very prominent. And so I'm going ahead and doing that first, getting all of the tops and bottoms there. And then moving on to, after I get the final little touches there, I'm moving on to doing the whites of her eyes. And for the whites of her eyes, I never use pure white. I use an off-white. In this case, it's Deck Tan that I'm using. And again, 1 or 2 coats just to get a nice, smooth, even coverage here within the eye. But take your time, go slow, small brush. And the nice thing about this at this point is, as long as you don't hit the skin, you can always just go back and forth between the eye and the black or the gray of the eyelash until you get it the shape of the eye the right way. These eyes are really well sculpted, so it was pretty straightforward to see exactly where it went. I'm using Lothran Blue here. This color will come into play later on in the model as well. And this will be the darker part of her eye. So this will be the larger part of her iris here. And I'm putting the eyes in just inside of center, meaning a little bit closer to her nose than the other way. I find if you do it this way, you get a much better natural look. If their eyes are, like I said, just pushed in towards the nose, just off of eye center, just a bit. And also have her looking, she'll be looking up just slightly, and that plays into how her bangs will be later on when we get to that point. And again, just going slow, shaping the eye. If you get it wrong, you can go back in with the white and redo it. Here I'm using a Blue Horse, an edge paint, so just be careful with your consistency when you're using a paint that might not be a normal like layer or base paint. But it was the right color. And this is putting on top of that the darker blue, and I'm leaving just a little bit of that darker blue around the outside edge, and then just using again real thin layers here. I probably put 2 or 3 coats total to get the amount of the light blue iris effect that I wanted here. And here's that Necro Gray, that same gray I used for the eyelashes. In fact, I'm just touching them up there before I move on to the pupil. So same color here. So you can see I'm putting the pupils in just to make her look upwards just slightly. Again, I find that this is a better approach to having more of a natural look. Whenever you try to make that model look like stare right at you, it's almost impossible to get the the view looking correctly. It always seemed like they're a little cross-eyed. And I'm using a white here, just a little dots there to give it that final last little detail of the eye. And here's our Orchis again. It was a great color for her lips, but any peach color would work here. I just like using colors that I've already used in the model. I feel that just helps with the overall consistency and look of a model to use the same colors elsewhere. But yeah, just any peach color. Onto her hair, I'm using this Bogren Brown as the base coat of the midtones of the shadows. So what I'm doing is putting this, obviously with the airbrush here, I'm going to put this over the entire amount of hair, both her bangs and then here shortly the rest of her hair. And I'm giving this a full coverage, but I'm not going, again, the same idea with the white earlier. I'm not blasting this into the deepest recesses, but I do want a nice coverage in most of the recesses. So if that doesn't make sense, maybe it makes more sense just watching me do it here. I'm just not, I want to keep that darkest in the absolute bottom there of the recesses, but it is a pretty even coverage otherwise. But like I said, this is going to be like the midtone of the shadow area. You can see I'm fitting the bangs to her head. Now I'm going to have to paint this all together to get the highlights and the shadows to work right. So my favorite tool here, I'm saying that facetiously, is liquid mask. I've had a lot of problems with this, but I found a great use for it. It works as a wonderful temporary glue, at least in this example here. So I use liquid mask to glue this together, and that will stay there until the hair is complete. The reason I couldn't glue it together is I need to take it apart later to put her head in there, her face. Okay, now switching over to a dark umber. This is the shadow color of her hair. And this is, I made it into a heavy wash, definitely a lot, at least 50-50 with water. And I'm going ahead and it's gonna look ugly for a while. I'm using a big brush and just slopping it in all the deepest recesses. Not worried at all about getting it on the upper parts of the hair, like meaning the parts of her hair that would have highlights on it later. Not worried about that at all. I'm just really want to establish where all my shadows are going to be. And but the reason I still use a wash is I want some of that bottom color, that color we just previously put on, I still want it to kind of blend it with this dark umber. And you can see it goes everywhere that there would be a shadow. And where are the shadows? Pretty much any area that's not facing upwards towards your direction of your light. That's where your shadows are. This hair is very deeply sculpted, so it's pretty easy to see where that would be. And now I'm switching to a golden brown. This is going to be the mid-tone of the highlights. So any of the part of the hair that would be facing the light would have this mid-tone applied to it. And you can see here I'm going into the recesses. I'm not just hitting the top part of the hair, I'm getting down into the cracks here as well. Because this is your mid-tone, it's not a highlight yet. It's a mid-tone of the highlight, but it in and of itself is not really a highlight yet. And again, this is really, hair looks horrible when you're painting hair. For me, it looks horrible until you're almost at the finish line, and then it just starts looking nice, looking like hair. So at this point, I consider this a blocking in stage, where I'm establishing where my shadows are, where my midtones of the shadows are, where my midtones of my highlights are, and I'm just establishing that. And the other thing with hair is there's the concept of like the halo of light or the banding, where your highlights kind of or your highest highlights are and how they roll into shadows, but then how they roll back out into highlights again. I'll try to illustrate that more later on when we get into that point. But so at this point, that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going over and applying a second coat to the same areas here to really give it that solid mid-tone of the highlight. I want that to be a nice solid golden brown color here. But again, like I said, this is a blocking in. I'm blocking in where my overall different colors of the hair are going to be. When I say colors, I mean the midtones, the highlights, and the shadows. they're going to be very abrupt right now. I'm not really worrying about any kind of a blending yet. I'm not worried about any gentle transitions yet. That'll come later on. So here I'm using about a 50-50 mix of the golden brown and dark umber. Mixing that, like I said, about 50-50, and it's thinned down quite a bit too. Not glazed thin, but it's thin. And here is the first blending between two colors here we're doing on the hair. And this is a blend between the deepest shadowed areas that was established by the pure dark umber and that mid-tone of the highlights of the golden yellow, golden brown, golden yellow. And this is the beginning of the transitions between those colors. Normally I would start with the highlights and kind of work from highlights down into shadows. Something about this model and the way I was feeling this day, I felt like I needed to start maybe in the shadowed areas and get that more established before I tackled more of the highlighted areas. Don't ask me why, it's just how I felt that day. But as you can see here, I'm really hitting the area where that dark umber and the golden brown are touching and softening that harsh transition out. It's the first step towards blending and transitioning. There'll definitely be more incremental steps here. And this isn't just the shadows in the back and the bottom of her hair. These are shadows wherever those the dark umber was applied. Here there was even shadows kind of inside her bangs a little bit that I'm working on. Now we start working on the highlights. So I'm doing about a 25 pale yellow, 75 golden brown to start with. So and here's where we're starting to establish where are more of the actual highlights of her hair going to be. And again, this is going to be starting wide and get more narrow as we lighten the color, as we make the values of the color higher. Also, still at this point, I'm making sure I'm getting down into the grooves of the actual sculpt of the hair here. I'm not just hitting the tippy tops of the sculpt. I want the color to be down in those recesses as well, because those recesses are facing right up into the light. So they wouldn't necessarily have the shadow there. And the exception there is the part of her hair. I'm still playing around with that. There'll be a lot more blending happening there here later on to get a final result on that. And just going ahead and establishing this halo effect on the top of her head, where the light's hitting the top of her head, and how it just creates like a circle or halo, if you will, around there. And then I'll be moving down here in a moment to create what I said earlier, these bands. So there'll be a band of this highlight color about halfway down her hair, where it kind of folds in around her neck, but then comes back out like just past her shoulders. And I'll have a band there, and then there'll be a final band right at the very bottom where I'm catching all the tips of her hair. Here is that band, just taking that halo effect now and just bringing it out into the bangs. And this is why I needed these two pieces attached while I was painting, because it all flows together. So it'd be a lot harder to do if the pieces were separate, having this natural halo effect at least look correct if the pieces weren't together already. The piece I'm not parting there, the piece I'm not painting there is just going to be her hairband. That'll get painted like a black later on. And now here I'm establishing that band that, as I just mentioned, I'm going around, and any part of the hair that's pretty much part of the band or facing up, for the most part, is facing up to the light, is where I'm putting this, my first band of highlight in. This is where I'm establishing that final band at the bottom of her hair, where all the bits of her hair kind of wing out and catch the light. So I kind of go over that concept of the banding again. So it started at the top, I got the halo area, and then I go into the kind of a shadowed area there, and then my big band on there, another shadowed area, and then finally another band of highlights at the bottom. I hope that helps. And then from this point now, the refining starts coming into place, as well as adding additional highlights. So this here, so on my palette at this point, I have all the colors we've used. and I'm just going and blending them into different levels, meaning brightnesses or not brightnesses of the color. So here I'm using, it's 50-50 of the pale yellow and golden brown. And what I'm doing is I'm tightening up what I had previously done with the highlights on the top of her hair. And that's what I'll end up doing, is just keep tightening up, getting my highlights in place first. So you want to get all your shadows in place, you want to get your midtones in place, you want to get your highlights in place, and you want to get your kind of like your final highlights in place. And then we'll go and hit the actual blending of all those steps. So as you can see, everywhere I'm stopping right now with the applying the highlights, it's kind of a rough transition to the layer below it, or the previous layer. And like I said, that's what we'll do here in a moment, is start blending that together to make it actually look like hair. And one other thing I want to mention here is, you see my brush strokes? I'm using many fine or many little brush strokes, but always with the direction of the hair that I'm painting. I find that also helps give it a lot of credibility to actually being hair, having all those mini brush strokes that follow along with each hair strand. So here I'm playing, I think it's pure pale yellow at this point. This is my highest highlight, or my brightest highlight, I should say, and I'm keeping it down to the narrowest band within that halo. Again, if you can see here, you can see real clearly the bands of color here. They're not blended, they're not transitioning well at all yet. But this will be the last step before I start that blending or that transitioning, is to get my absolute final highlight placement. And that final placement isn't only the top of her head, it's within each of those bands that I established previously. So I wouldn't be taking this color and putting it anywhere but inside of a band I've already established, but now it's the tightest line within the band, or tightest line is the best word here to use for where I'm placing the final highlights here. It's just right in there. And also it does that line doesn't have to be exactly the same width across the entire band. It's good to fluctuate that a little bit, and always, of course, follow the actual shape and contours of each of the strands of the hair that's being painted, because each strand of hair is its own miniature little shape that you need to recognize and adjust accordingly to how hair or how light would normally bounce off of that type of shape. So, if it's a cylinder type shape or more of a sphere type shape, for example. Now I'm into the blending. This is where I really want to have the hair start looking actually like hair instead of a bunch of different colors on the piece. So I'm going on my palette and I'm grabbing any different blends between all the colors we used already, the golden brown, the not so much a dark umber anymore. We've established where the darkest parts are, but the golden browns and the pale yellows for the highlight area. And again, I'm just going in those deeper areas where I'm in right now, I would actually be using a slight amount of the dark umber as well, just to help the transition. So here I'm working on doing more of the transitions of the shadow areas, from the mid-tone shadow into the darker shadow, getting that more of a nice smooth blend. And all these layers I'm putting on right now, they're very thin. Not quite glaze, at least not in the shadowed areas, but pretty close. You can always put on more layers. It's a lot easier to put on layers than ever try to reverse that and take them off. So just keep that in mind. And same here in the hair on her bangs. Going ahead and doing some color adjusting, some balancing here. I didn't like how dark they were towards the tips. In fact, I'll be lightening up quite a bit here in a moment. And now I'm working on blending the different layers or bands of the highlights. So here again, I'll just be using a mixture of the pale yellow and the golden brown to find the proper level, proper color intensity that I want. And here I'm just blending. Now I'm blending in the final highlight on top of her head, blending in that final highlight of pure pale yellow with, again, a mixture of pale yellow and golden brown to blend the two, the transition of the mid-tone to the highlights here. Yeah, it's just a process. You have just a back and forth process, and sometimes you can get it in 1 or 2 coats of the blending. Sometimes it takes more. The thing is here is just just be patient, let your coats dry between applications, and keep going until you're happy with the final result. This is one of those things where it takes a long time, especially a hair this size, and you can go pretty much forever with blending here. You just got to get to a point where you're satisfied with how it looks, and then call it quits. Here I decided that it was really a harsh transition when I held the piece back from the halo highlight on the top to the banding in the middle, and it felt like it was just like really of a harsh transition from light, dark, light. So what I'm doing is I'm taking some of those strands that were coming down from the top part of her head down to the middle, and I'm just putting a little bit more of the pale yellow, golden brown coloring on there, kind of just giving it more of a softer highlight to help kind of blend it all together, so to speak, and just make it a little bit more natural. So these are the kind of things you look at when you're painting this. Is like, does this look natural? Does this look correct? If it does, great. If it doesn't, just do some adjustments. Just small adjustments can make a big difference here. Just highlighting a few of those strands like I did really just tied this whole piece together in the back. And after some more blending work, this is the final result that I was happy with her hair, of course minus painting the hairband. And to prove that liquid mask actually worked, after I was all done painting the hairband, I just pried it right off. It came off real nice, and then it fits right back in. And here I'm just touching up the hairband. I use that Necro Gray again for the hairband as well. For Alice's dress, I'm starting with this Gravedigger denim from P3, which is now bought by Steamforged Games, and I just happened to learn that they are going to start making the P3 paints. In fact, there was a Kickstarter last fall that I didn't even know about till recently. So hopefully sometime this year they'll get their new paints out, and they put them in dropper bottles, I saw too, which is fantastic. But anyway, I'm going ahead and I'm putting this Gravedigger denim as a base coat for all the blue parts of Alice's dress. Again, like typical, I start with a darker color and will build up to a lighter color. So that's just establishing a nice dark blue color. I'm trying to use colors in this model that are more of a creamy color, I guess, for lack of a better word. Not necessarily pastel, but more of like a creamy color. And I felt this was a good base color for that. And now moving on to a Lothran blue, and this will be really more of the base color of her dress. I'm spraying this from an angle, not to hit right down into the middle of those folds on her dress. I'm really just kind of hitting it from the side, and I really want to maintain that darkest color into the folds. And then I'm hitting it more directly on the edges of her dress. And the same kind of idea here with her sleeves, hitting it mostly from top down and then from the sides, just not to get into the folds of her sleeves that are bunched up. Using a 50-50 mixture of sky blue and titanium white for the almost final color. We'll punch it a little bit more at the very end here, but this is giving the dress that really light blue that I think Alice's dress has. So again, focusing more on the highlighted, or not the highlighted areas, but the areas that are peaking, like the top of the folds, and of course all around the bottom hem of her dress. And just really trying to stay away from any of the recesses, the folds, and that of the dress. Now doing the same thing with her sleeves, just again from top down for the most part, and not hitting the creases or folds at all. Here I went with a lighter blend. It was maybe 25 blue, 75 of the white now, and this is just like a final highlight. I thought it needed an extra little punch to really give the blue that contrast it needed between blue and the light blue. I chose this Uthring Gray by Citadel as my white color. I don't normally like to paint straight white. I think it looks too harsh. But again, going back to that concept of more creamy colors for this model, I thought it was a great creamy white that wasn't too much of an ivory color. It really is like a neutral gray, but on the cool side, without it being too blue either. Anyhow, I just thought it was the perfect white for her dress. The parts of her dress that are white. So it's pretty much all the fringes. It's the fringe parts around her sleeves and her apron that covers both her chest as well as the bottom part of her dress. Just taking my time here, using the right size brush for the area that I'm painting, keeping this, painting these colors like whites and yellows in it. You really want to keep the paint pretty thin, but not too thin either. You don't want it runny. If it wicks up into a fold on the blue, then you won't be happy. So it needs to be thin, so when it dries, it's nice and even coat. But I always caution people not to go too thin either. And this white took probably 3 coats to get a nice full even coverage. So as here I'm painting the top part of her apron that covers her blue dress. The tie will end up being black, or that necro gray here in a moment, but you can see that the white doesn't cover. It just doesn't cover in one coat, and that's fine, but I'm making sure that I'm putting it on in thin enough coats where when it dries it'll have a nice smooth even coverage. Hitting the fringes, I'm sure there's a word for this, I don't know what it is. The edges of the apron, let's go with that, the frilly edges, and these stick out, so I have to get on the back side as well. Again, I'm just taking my time, using kind of a big brush here, but it worked. Onto the hem of her skirt, I'm using the same color as I did with the apron. I think it works really, really well with this blue, and just taking my time going around, hitting each one of these little ruffle folds, being careful not to touch the blue of the dress, and eventually I make it all the way around. And her apron extends down from her chest down onto the lower part of her dress, which I'm painting here right now. This is a big area. I was tempted to mask off the blue and hit this with the airbrush, but I decided to just not go through that amount of pain in case things went awry. So just using a really big brush and thin paint again, and just steady hand, making sure not to hit the blue, and putting on thin coats. And again, this was probably about 3 coats worth before I got the final solid, smooth, even white coverage that I was looking for. Alice has a big bow on her back, which also is it's basically tying the apron, so it's the same color as her apron, and this is just being airbrushed on that Uthring Gray. I keep calling this Necro Black, and it's actually Decay Black. So everywhere I previously said Necro Black, it's actually this Decay Black. It's the same black I'm using on the entire model, whether it's her pupils over her eyes or the bow that I'm painting here now. Anyhow, Decay Black, not Necro Black. My apology on that. Again, same idea. Nice, take your time. This is sped up video, so it looks like I'm just flying like crazy with the brush. I'm actually not. It's I'm going quite a bit slower than the video actually lends you to believe. And it just, if you mess up here a little bit, that white's super easy to touch up. So not the end of the world if you hit the white with the black. I'm switching over to Pallid Witch Flesh for her stockings. I just wanted a little bit different color than what was on her apron and that, so I thought this was a good color there. I used Silly Putty to mask off the skin parts there, and now I'm using a dark umber. This is the same color we used in the her shadows of her hair. So making her her shoes a dark brown. being very careful not to hit her stockings, and just taking my time. This brown, it took probably 3 coats to get a nice solid dark brown, even coverage of her shoes. So I really don't know what I was thinking. I ended up painting the bottoms of her shoes, which was fine. I'm glad I did. But the hole there, in my head, I had it thought that that hole was going to be kind of covered up with the mushroom she sits on, that you would never see the holes. Well, you see at the end of the video, you kind of do see them, and by that point, I just let it go. But if you're doing your own, just I would suggest covering those holes up. Just patching them with however you would normally patch holes in models. Using a walnut color with a dry brush, kind of a really aggressive dry brush, to scuff up her shoes. Now I want her toes scuffed up. I want the backside of above her heel scuffed up as well. Scuff up the sides a little bit, just to make them look more worn, like used, not so much pristine. I really want them to look broken in and well used. Using a thrash metal for the little buckle on her shoes. I'm using my zoomy goggles here to see this. They're super tiny. And then, of course, I went too heavy, and I'm just using that walnut here to go back and touch up to get the colors in the right spots, make sure that the silver didn't go over it. Apothecary white for the rabbit. This is giving, I've sprayed this on the underside. It really gives a great white shadow, if you will, for the rabbit. And then from the top down, I'm using a Purity White to give the white rabbit its white color. From the top down there with the Apothecary underside, it still has different shadows and shades to the white. It's not just one solid white color. And here I'm using the same color I used for her lips, for Alice's lips on the bunny's nose, and just making that all look like a bunny. And I'm using that same color also for her fingernails, just going around hitting each little fingernail on the one hand that's holding the bunny on the bunny's back, and then just hitting a little bit of white on each tip of her fingers. So for the base, I ended up using my Bambu Labs printer, my filament printer for this, and 2 of the 3 pieces worked fantastic. The stem here worked great, and the top of the mushroom also worked great. This piece here, it's got so many different mushrooms on it. Not gonna lie, I broke probably 3 of those little mushrooms when I was taking the supports off. So obviously I had to glue them back on. But all in all, I was really happy that I'm being able to use my filament printer for printing these bases. Here I took all the extra, all the foliage that also gets stuck into the base, that I use resin printer for, and I just stuck it all in temporarily to give myself, this is more of a true zenithal. This is definitely top down primer. I primered it black, and now I'm doing a white zenithal, same as how the video started. But this is top down. And well, this isn't, of course. This is the underside of the mushroom. But again, I'm trying to keep the shadows of the mushroom veins, or the whatever that term is for the way the mushroom stalk and whatchamacallit, I don't know what word it is. The shape of the mushroom, the veins. I'm going to call them veins. And here I'm just going ahead and just doing a non-zenithal, if you will. And I'm going back now. I'm punching in more white in the areas that the light's going to hit most. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to be using some contrast paints on some of this, so I really want that extra white there to really make those contrast paints pop out nice and vibrant for the model. Now I'm just popping out each one of these little pieces. They just pop out, and I will spray paint each one of those separate. It was an adventure getting these pieces in. I had to do a lot of monkey work with scraping off the keys and that to get them to fit. And some of them never did fit 100% great, but a lot of it was all hidden down and underneath the mushrooms and that, so I wasn't really worried about it. I'm using, this is interesting, so it's going to say metal here, these colors. I'm using 2 different ones. So I love the tone of these colors, And they, even though they say they're metal and alchemy, they're not really metallic. They are and they aren't. But the way I'm gonna negate the metallic part of this is after I get the color on, I'm going to go back later on and hit this with an ultra matte varnish, which will knock the shiny bits off. More on that in a bit. So I'm using this contrast paint or speed paint here for the underside of the mushroom. Anything that's not part of the actual top part, I don't know mushrooms obviously. And here I'm using on the stalk of the mushroom as well. This ended up going on darker than I was expecting. I was expecting this to be a lot more closer to white than this really ochre-ish color that it ended up being. So I'll be fixing that here in a moment with some dry brushing. Grabbing some green speed paint here, orc skin. I'm hitting all of the grassy bits and just making sure I don't over coverage. I want to make sure that the whites and the blacks are represented through the contrast paint. So it's one thing with the contrast paints when you're doing this over the over your whites is if you go too much, you kind of lost the effect. So start thin, and you can always put more on later. But for me, that's the best results I've always gotten is when I don't overdo it here. And now I'm just hitting in part of that leaf. It's just the green part because here in a moment I'll be switching colors for the actual leaf part. And here it is. I'm using this amaranthine green, was it, from Citadel? It's more of like a bluish color. And I'm just putting these on. I wanted fairy colors. So here's what kind of like interesting pastel-y fairy colors on the base bits. I thought that would work really well with Alice in general, and I thought these are great colors to use for this. Now here's this metal and alchemy. This in the bottle it looked more purple than it went on. It went on more pink, and at the end I was okay with it. I think it worked great, but I was hoping it was just a little bit more purple, like it looked through the bottle. But again, it's super shiny at this point. It's not glittery. It's weird. It's not really what I would call a metallic, but it's super shiny. It's kind of like fingernail polish, I guess. And then I'll dull it down here in a little bit. Switching over, like I mentioned a bit ago, I'm just using a really heavy dry brush, wet brush, over brush to lighten up the stalk or the stem of the mushroom. It was too dark. Here's my ultra. This is the best varnish, by the way. This is the absolute best ultra matte varnish I've ever come across from AK. And this, you can't see it here until pretty much at the end, but this is really taking that shine, really taking the shine away, but leaving this color and the nuances of how that paint is made. So using walnut to go ahead and paint all the dirt and just the dirt, which is majority of this base is dirt. Going around and just getting a nice even coverage of the dirt. And hitting a little bit of the dirt up onto the stalks of those little mushrooms, but leaving most of the mushroom stalk the white color that it was. And here's just using a neutral gray for some of the rocks. Just going around, hitting all the prominent rocks around the edges of the base. I'm not really concerned about hitting every single one because some of them can be covered with dirt, and that's a-okay. And then the final thing I did on the base, I didn't capture it on video, but I used an Agrex Earth Shade wash across the whole thing, rocks and dirt. And it's already been applied. Now I'm just gluing the stem in first. The mushroom stem had to be glued in before I could put all the bits and bobs of the foliage in, because the foliage kind of pinches it all in together there. So again, just going around super gluing each piece in until the bottom portion of the base is finished. I also decided I needed to do that dry brushing on the bottom of the mushroom so the stem and the mushroom would come together and blend together a lot better than it would have otherwise. So I just this particular color just doesn't. It was just too dark for me on the mushroom stem and the underside of the mushroom base. And now I'm gluing that part together. And now onto the final assembly. pretty straightforward, except for one part. Her hair and face and everything glued together, just wonderful. She glued to her torso just fine. The headband went on great. This is the part that it gave me flashbacks to when I used to build Space Marines, where you had to hold the body, the left arm, the right arm, and the gun, and try to bring it all together at the same time. And this is kind of that a little bit. This is a really good example of why I use that E6000 glue and not always just use super glue, because I use that E6000 where her upper torso glued to her lower part, her dress, and I'm really glad I did, because I had to adjust her upper torso so many times to get her left arm and the bunny all to line up together. And her little hand is also part of underneath the bunny. So all that was a trick to line up as it was. And then this wasn't so bad, just a little fiddling around to get her right arm in, which is great. But then I realized that this back bow should have went on earlier. So here you can see I'm prying her apart to get the bow in. Like I said, it just felt like Space Marine building all over again in a way, but I've had to wiggle that in kind of a little aggressively to get it all together. But again, since I used the E6000, it was great. She wasn't fully attached yet. I had plenty of time to do what I just did there with no problems. So I didn't have to sit there and hold her for hours. I did use a little bit of super glue at the very end just to tack that last part of her in. Her legs actually attached to the mushroom, not her, which is kind of interesting, but those glued in. Put more E6000 on, and just put the rest of her on top of her mushroom. And at this point, she's done and ready to be put on display. I'm pleased with how the model turned out. I would do two things differently if I were going to do it over again, though. I would definitely fill the holes in the bottom of her shoes, and I would fill the seam between the stem and the top of the mushroom. I thought the seam wouldn't be as visible as it ended up being, but that's how it ended up. I want to thank you for watching, and if you found any part of this video helpful, please consider leaving a comment or a like. It's greatly appreciated. And if you like this video, I would suspect you might like the next video coming up as well.